The city was trembling, but no one above ground felt it. It wasn't an earthquake. It was a subway drill, boring through layers of forgotten time. When the construction lights flickered deep beneath Manhattan's Lower East Side, the workers thought they saw shadows, not from men, but from walls, doorways, and faint outlines of streets that shouldn't exist. In the dim dust, one man brushed his glove against a carved stone archway, and what flaked off wasn't concrete. It was limestone, hand-cut and etched with Dutch script from the 1600s. New York has always been called the city that never sleeps, but the truth is more chilling. Parts of it have been asleep for centuries, buried by progress, sealed beneath steel and glass, and paved over by history itself. Archaeologists estimate that nearly 80% of Manhattan's original ground layer, the soil walked by native Lenape tribes, the Dutch colonists, and early American settlers, now lies entombed beneath layers of asphalt, tunnels, and skyscrapers. Each generation literally built its world on top of another. Most people think they know New York, the skyline, the noise, the light that never dies. But beneath that brilliance lies an invisible mirror city, one of abandoned subway stations, forgotten rivers, sealed chambers, and ancient foundations that whisper stories of centuries past. And if you listen closely, sometimes you can still hear it breathing. The discovery. In 2017, a city engineer named Ethan Rowe was overseeing a new water tunnel expansion near Delancey Street, one of the oldest neighborhoods in Manhattan. The job was routine, one of the countless infrastructure projects meant to keep the city's arteries pumping. But when his crew drilled into a soft patch of earth, the drill bit hit something hollow, something that echoed. When they widened the hole, a cavern appeared, not a natural one, but a chamber built by hand. Inside were timbers blackened with age, a stone wall, and what appeared to be a cobbled street perfectly preserved beneath 30 feet of dirt and steel. At first, the city halted construction, assuming it was an old sewage tunnel or a disused utility path. But within days, a team of archaeologists from Columbia University and the New York City Landmarks Commission arrived, and what they found astonished even the most skeptical scientists. The chamber was too old to be 19th century, and the stone used wasn't local to Manhattan. It matched Dutch limestone imported during the 1620s, the era of New Amsterdam, when Manhattan was a colony of the Dutch West India Company. And then they found the symbol, a carved emblem, faint but unmistakable, a windmill encircled by the initials VOC, the monogram of the Verenigde Oostindies, the Dutch East India Company. The forgotten foundation. If the chamber was authentic, it meant something extraordinary, that beneath the modern streets of Manhattan, pieces of the original Dutch colony still existed, sealed off since the English takeover in 1664. Until that discovery, historians believed the early structures of New Amsterdam were long destroyed, replaced by British forts, American independence projects, and modern urban renewal. But this chamber suggested something else. The Dutch might have built deeper, laying out structures meant to last for centuries. Records from 17th century ship manifests hinted at materials never accounted for, tons of imported stone and lumber that simply disappeared from company ledgers. Some theorized it was used for a hidden storage system or refuge in case of war. Was this chamber part of it? As the team expanded the excavation, they uncovered more clues: clay pipes, glass fragments from Dutch gin bottles, a rusted musket barrel, and even a child's wooden toy carved in the shape of a lion, miraculously preserved by the low oxygen of the underground chamber. Ethan Rowe, the engineer who discovered it, later said in an interview, "It felt like stepping into a time capsule, a piece of the city that refused to die." The layers beneath. To understand the magnitude of what they found, you have to imagine Manhattan not as a single city, but a vertical civilization, a stack of worlds, each buried beneath the next. Beneath the pavement of Soho, archaeologists have found the cellars of 18th century taverns. Under Washington Square Park, they discovered an old pauper cemetery with more than 20,000 human remains still resting below where NYU students now play guitar. And under Times Square, a forgotten stream once called the Great Kill, where Lenape fishermen cast nets for salmon before the first European ship ever arrived. Every time a new subway tunnel or skyscraper foundation is dug, history reemerges, sometimes for just a moment, before being covered again. But the chamber under Delancey Street was different. It was larger, more deliberate, and it seemed to connect to something, a tunnel sealed by a stone door. When they cleared the debris and carefully opened that door, they didn't find another chamber. They found a corridor, descending deeper, perfectly aligned toward the southwest. It was narrow, but carved with precision. And on the wall in Old Dutch script was a single phrase, "For degenen die terugkeren," for those who return. Echoes of the past. The city tried to keep the discovery quiet, classifying it as archaeological interest under evaluation. But news travels fast in New York. Within weeks, rumors of a lost Dutch tunnel began circulating on online forums and in local papers. Some claimed it led to an underground vault of colonial treasures. Others said it was a burial site, or even a secret escape route built when the English fleet invaded. The truth was stranger. When they mapped the tunnel's direction, it led not toward the East River, but straight toward Battery Park, the southern tip of Manhattan, where the Dutch first landed in 1624. It seemed to trace the path of the original shoreline before centuries of landfill expanded the island. That meant this tunnel might predate most of Manhattan itself. The unwritten chapter of New York. Over the next few months, the team continued exploring, documenting, and mapping every inch. They found wooden braces dated to the early 1600s, indicating advanced engineering for the era. The air inside was strangely breathable, thanks to tiny ventilation shafts leading upward, suggesting the builders expected it to last. A report was quietly sent to the Smithsonian. One expert wrote, "If verified, this discovery will rewrite early American urban history. New York was not just a colony, it was a fortress of global trade hidden beneath its own foundations." But before the findings could be published, the tunnel was sealed off again under the pretext of public safety concerns. Construction resumed. Officially, the site was closed. Unofficially, it was forgotten again. Or so the city hoped. Because months later, Ethan Rowe received a letter with no return address. Inside was an old map, brittle, drawn in Dutch ink, and a note. "You found one entrance. There are more. The city beneath the city was never meant to be uncovered."
When Ethan Rowe opened the letter, the paper felt older than the city itself. The parchment was yellowed, creased with centuries of sleep, and faintly smelled of sea salt and oil. The handwriting, done with a quill, slanted elegantly, the old Dutch style that curved like the sails of their ships. He turned it over in his hands, uncertain if it was a prank, a forgery, or a warning. But when he unfolded the attached map, he felt a chill move through him. It wasn't just any map of Manhattan. It was a version of the island that no historian had ever shown him. The island before the city. The map was labeled in Dutch, Mannahatta, 1626. Before it was Manhattan, before it was New York, it was the island of Mannahatta, the land of many hills, home to the Lenape people for thousands of years. But what startled Ethan wasn't the age of the map, it was what was beneath it. Drawn faintly in red ink were tunnels, symbols, and rectangular blocks beneath the main settlement labeled New Amsterdam. These weren't cellars or fortifications, they were too deep, drawn like layers below the surface. At the map's edge, near the southern tip of the island, was a small mark, a windmill emblem identical to the one carved on the stone door beneath Delancey Street. And next to it, a signature, A. Vandermeer, cartographer of the company, 1641. The Forgotten Cartographer. The name was unfamiliar to Ethan, but when he showed the map to a historian friend at Columbia, her eyes widened. Adrian Vandermeer, the phantom cartographer? In the early Dutch archives of New Amsterdam, there were dozens of references to him, a brilliant surveyor and draftsman who mapped the island before the British conquest. But none of his original maps survived. Historians knew him only from company payroll logs and letters of complaint. He'd been accused of exceeding his duties and recording unauthorized detail. He vanished in 1647. Some said he returned to Holland. Others whispered he disappeared in the wilderness. But if this map was authentic, it meant Vandermeer had charted not only the surface of Manhattan, but also what lay beneath it. The code in the compass. Ethan examined the compass rose on the map. It was beautifully ornate, drawn with gold ink and the image of a lion holding a key. At first glance it was decorative, but under magnification he noticed something unusual. The compass wasn't aligned with true north. Instead, the needle pointed directly toward a point under modern-day Wall Street. In the 1600s, Wall Street was literally that, a wall, a wooden palisade built by the Dutch to defend their colony from the English and from upriver tribes. But below it, no official records mentioned tunnels or chambers. Except one, a surviving Dutch document from 1655, the Ledger of Fort Amsterdam, referenced subterranean storage for company assets built beyond the line of defense. Most historians assumed it referred to cellars or vaults, but Ethan began to suspect otherwise. If Vandermeer's map was correct, those assets might still lie buried, sealed by centuries of landfill, forgotten by time. The archive below the library. To verify the map, Ethan needed access to the New York Historical Archive, where the Dutch records of New Amsterdam were kept, most of them locked in climate-controlled chambers beneath the New York Public Library. He requested a research permit under the guise of infrastructure analysis. Days later, he descended the old marble steps of the library at 42nd Street, the one guarded by two silent stone lions, Patience and Fortitude. The archivist, a soft-spoken man named Marcus Leclerc, greeted him without surprise. "You're not the first engineer to come looking for ghosts," he said dryly. Ethan laid the map on the table. Leclerc's expression shifted from amusement to awe. He ran a gloved hand gently across the ink. "This is impossible," he murmured. "This was lost during the Great Fire of 1776. Where did you get this?" Ethan hesitated. "Let's just say it found me." Leclerc peered closer. "Vandermeer used red for hidden structures. I've only seen references to them, never an original. Do you realize what this means?" It means the tunnel we found under Delancey Street might not be alone. A city built on buried rivers. Leclerc pulled a modern geological overlay from the archive's database and matched it with the ancient map. The alignment was shocking. Each tunnel on Vandermeer's map corresponded roughly to the paths of Manhattan's lost rivers, streams that once carved the island before being buried by development. The Collect Pond near modern-day Chinatown had once been Manhattan's main freshwater source. The Minetta Brook once flowed through Greenwich Village. The Wreck Brook, now long vanished, ran roughly under the Bowery.
And Vandermeer's tunnels seemed to follow these waterways, as if the Dutch engineers had intentionally built over or within them, using the natural channels for something deeper. Leclerc looked up from the maps. They weren't just building cellars. They were creating a network, maybe drainage, or maybe something else entirely. Ethan leaned forward. Storage for what? The historian hesitated. The Dutch East India Company was the wealthiest enterprise in the world. They moved gold, ivory, spices, and secrets. If they wanted to hide something from the English, he tapped the table, they'd bury it here, beneath their own city. The Ledger of Shadows. In the days that followed, Ethan and Leclerc combed through the Dutch company's digitized archives. Most were in archaic Dutch, written in the florid hand of merchants and shipmasters. But one entry, dated August 1646, caught their attention. It referenced, quote, the transport of ledgers and assets to the understorehouse, as directed by A.V.M. A.V.M. Adrian Vandermeer. The document continued. The lower chambers to remain sealed by order of the company, not to be disturbed by any but the appointed custodian. The key to rest within the windmill mark. Ethan reread the last sentence. The key to rest within the windmill mark. He remembered the carving on the stone door, the windmill encircled by the Dutch company's initials. Was that just a symbol or an actual mechanism? Leclerc looked uneasy. This isn't just a mapmaker's design. It's a code, a warning. The custodian could have been a person, a guardian of what's beneath. And if the chamber we found is the understorehouse, Ethan said slowly, then somewhere out there, the custodian's key still exists. Buried truths, modern fears. They decided to keep their research quiet, for now, but the city had other plans. The Department of Transportation, frustrated by the delays, sealed off the Delancey dig entirely. Access was revoked. Ethan's clearance was revoked too. Within a week, the files related to the chamber vanished from the city's records. Even the photos, gone. He called Leclerc in panic, but the archivist's number had been disconnected. That night, as he walked past the construction site, Ethan noticed something strange. A convoy of city-marked trucks parked outside, though no public work was scheduled. Men in plain uniforms were unloading crates into the tunnel. When he tried to take a picture, a man stepped out of the shadows. "Mr. Rowe, you've seen enough of the past. Some things are better left buried." The letter from the past. 2 weeks later, another envelope arrived. No return address again, just his name, typed neatly. Inside was a single page from an old journal, the handwriting almost identical to the one on the map. It read, "If you have found this, you are walking my path. The tunnels are many. They were not meant for treasure, but for remembrance. The city will try to bury what it cannot explain. Follow the rivers. They lead to truth." At the bottom, a signature. A. Vandermeer. But what made Ethan's hands tremble wasn't the name. It was the inkblot in the lower corner. A perfect miniature windmill drawn in red.
and beneath it, coordinates. Coordinates that led to Trinity Churchyard, one of the oldest sites in New York, and just blocks from Wall Street, where the compass on the map pointed. The ghosts beneath the stones. Ethan stood there the next morning, among weathered graves older than the nation itself. Alexander Hamilton's tomb glimmered nearby, the marble catching sunlight through the trees. But beneath the earth, beneath the church's foundation, lay centuries of sealed crypts, and perhaps, if Vandermeer's map was to be believed, the next entrance to the underground city. He brushed aside fallen leaves, looked at the coordinates again, and saw it. A small, almost invisible engraving of a windmill on the side of an old headstone. The same symbol, the same promise. He knelt beside it, tracing the mark with his fingers, and whispered to the ghost of a man who might still be listening from the depths, "I found you." And from somewhere below, far beneath the earth, beneath steel and stone and the weight of 4 centuries, something shifted. A rumbling, a breath, as if the city itself was waking up.